Happy Thursday, everyone. A little bit of a change of pace today. So Rachel is on vacation. How dare her? But I'm stepping in to at least try to be a host for the Hangout. Welcome to the Data Science Hangout. If this is the first time that you're joining, welcome. We're super glad that you're here. If you're returning, which I suspect a lot of you are, welcome back. Love that. As a reminder, this is a casual conversation and a casual environment. So if you're here and you have thoughts, we want to hear from you, no matter how much experience you have or don't have. This space and this hour is really for you. So with all that said, I want to introduce our leader or featured leader for the day, Matthew Montero. Super glad that you're here. Maybe introduce yourself and tell us what's going on.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. So my name is Matthew Montero. I head enterprise data services within Genry. On the IT side, actually, so it might be a little bit different, where we actually provide services for the business. So whether that may be database services or data lake services, data science services, which I think a lot of you guys would be interested in, and data reporting services. And then with that, it's all about provide systems and applications that are hardened by IT, but then also in a self-service way as well. So meaning that here's a platform that business can build on or improve on, and we support to make sure that they'll stay up and running. My background actually is actuarial. About 12 years back, graduated college, was gun ho with being an actuary, doing all those exams. I landed into a job where I got to do both actuarial work, but then got a little flavor of analytics. And from then I grew to overseeing a team, building a team from ground up and overseeing that team. Eventually I had a little time in pharmaceuticals, which I also was building a analytical team to solve the clinical trial automation challenge. But then from there, I moved on to here to eventually leading a whole data organization, reporting to the CTO. A little background.
Wonderful. And we're thrilled to have you. If you're just joining in, I said it once, but I'll say it again. I'm stepping in for Rachel this week. She's taking a vacation, doing my best. There are a few ways to participate. We want to hear from all of you. So you can keep your camera off, put your camera on, keep yourself on mute, take yourself off mute. You can submit questions or comments via the Zoom chat, or you can use a Slido, which is an anonymous link. So you can ask questions anonymously. And feel free to hop into the conversation and ask anything that might be on your mind that you're curious about Matthew. We usually start with a few standard things. Matthew, I looked at your background. It's quite impressive and interesting. You've gone from what I think is sort of an individual contributor role to quite a senior leadership oriented role. I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that journey with everyone.
Yeah, so even from the beginning, I was always interested in data and also the process to engineer that data to actually get some insights from it. So being an actuary is always very analytical and trying to solve that. So that's what my individual contributor, like let me build some applications, or let me try to find ways to simplify that process, or at least automate the process from there. But then when I was maybe 5-6 years into that space, I was like, well, I want to start leading teams. I want to start building, working with others and mentor others to start being able to do that. So that's when I started becoming more of a team lead or a technical lead. But once I got into pharmaceuticals, it was very different because the company was a lot bigger. And then I had the pleasure of having a manager who was very focused on vision. And so that's when I really got the feel for, like, once you have a vision and you can sell that vision, then you have the ability to build as big as a team you want or need, and be able to back that up with some either ways to improve the business or ways to even improve the organization as a whole. So with that knowledge that I gained through that, through experience of dealing with getting consultants or getting new hires and coming and defining more strategy for that vision, moved on to the current company I'm with, GenRe. And it kind of fostered from there is that let me take this vision, let me define a little further the way I feel it should be at this company, and then let me build a full strategy around that. Let me figure out from day one when you get the data in to all the way to building applications that use that data, or the self-service route of other people wanting to use that data for their analytical purposes. Let me build that strategy around that. And so being able to both build that strategy and communicate that to executives, to different business units, the heads of different business units, it kind of moved me up higher relatively fast in a sense. But it's being very confident in that vision and being in the strategy and even the principles around that as well.
And could you clarify what you mean by vision?
Yes. So if you take a step back and you think of the data you have, and think of all the data processes going back and forth, like how is that actually going to work? Like in a sense of data ingestion. Do you want a platform there, or do you think that it should just land to some folder? Do you feel that everything should be in a database, or do you think something should be in a data lake? Once you get the data into that, now what happens to it? Well, where does the data processing happen? Does the business units themselves are going to be doing all that, or should it be centralized? And then from that point, now you have the data process. Now what do you do with it? Do you just create some canned reports and be able to have the executives be able to see that, or do you go to other stream and having business now take that data and do other stuff with it, create their own reports, create their own analytics analysis? Then you got to take a step even further back of, well, what if you're in a global company? Do you have to do this all at a central location, or do you have to split this up into regional locations? So it's really laying out the whole piece, the whole vision of how everything is going to be. You didn't go into technicals yet of how to actually accomplish that, just high view what it all looks like. And that's the first thing you got to sell. And because at least you have a vision, you have something you can communicate to everyone. And then that's when you kind of break down now what's that strategy to accomplish that vision. Because you can't do all that one day. It's going to take some time. So you have to have individual steps or strategy to accomplish that.
And I'm more so personally curious, but again, everyone, you can put your own questions in the Zoom chat and also in the Slido, and we'll prioritize those. But at sort of what level of your career do you think it's appropriate to start thinking about visions and at that sort of level of abstraction?
Yeah, so it got to where so at a time when I was a little bit earlier, it got to a point when I was leading a team, and I was asked to, how are you going to, you know my vision. So my boss at the time, you know my vision. How are you going to make that vision happen? Once I was given that, when I can sit down and actually really think through that, that's when the moment it clicked in my head, like this is my next step. This is what I want to be able to do, is both define that vision, to define that high level strategies to do it, and then work with teams to actually make that happen. And that was the time it really clicked on me. So that was about a couple of years back.
Great. And for those who might be unfamiliar with GenRe, or sort of exactly what you do, could you give a little background there? GenRe, your role in it, where you fit in?
Yeah, so GenRe is a general reinsurance company. We're a global company. We build reinsurance policies directly, and direct insurance, and I oversee the data department. So I report to CTO, who oversees the whole IT department. My job is to oversee anything regarding data. So we can think of databases, data lakes, data reporting, data science. So anything from IT perspective, I oversee that. I create the processes around there, or oversee the processes around there. Each of those verticals would have their own managers in there that will take the overall vision or strategy and see it through. Yeah, so some of the pieces is just keeping lights on. So meaning if there's a database up and running, maybe we can think of it like a shell. Like here's a database. Business units, they can use it the way they want it, but we'll just make sure that stays up and running. If it goes off, well, we'll make sure that, or it dies, we'll make sure that we get it back up and running as soon as we can. Or if say, or if you're doing some data recovery or whatnot, we will oversee that as well.
Great. And there is a question from Brittany in the chat. I just want to make sure that we're super clear. Someone who's the head of, let's say, data science versus, I think your title is data services. Is there a difference? Could you just clarify? Yeah,
so if you think of someone who's going to bring that service up and running, so I think RStudio Pro would be a good example. So one of the things I did when I first started was like, let's put RStudio Pro into our ecosystem. And so let's bring that, let's get all the IT team all together. Let's get all the, we had to get infrastructure in, we had to get all those pieces. So once you get, then you get installed and get it up and running. So that is the self-service or enablement that my area do. So that's the services we provide is bringing that up and running and like providing it for the business units to use. The data science from the business side will now use that service, use that platform, and build data science related products, might be analysis, machine learning, or whatnot. So it's kind of like we build it, they will come and use it, and if they want more features or they want changes to it, then they work with us to actually make those changes happen.
Great. And Brittany, I see that you have a question in the chat. If you wouldn't mind, do you want to hop in and ask that?
Yeah, sure. So just listening to you kind of in your career progression, I'm at, selfishly at the point in my career now where I'm thinking, what is next? And I'm trying to think through, like, what does that look like? How do, like, as an analyst, what are the next steps? What are the possible next things that I could do? I have some ideas, but I really don't know, like, how to set those sort of, I'll call them like my 5-year, 3-year types of career goals. Do you have any advice for people in that kind of individual contributor role as they're trying to think through how do I set a path for where I may end up in the next like handful of years or so?
Yes, so great question. So the way I always think of like basically 4 different phases for someone in tech. Is you do you're an analyst, move to an engineer, and I'll talk about each one in a second. You go to engineer, you go to architect, and you go to principal. As an analyst, you come in into you guys going into different projects, and you're just trying to understand high level what is actually going on. Might dig into some details and try to know where things are flowing. So you might not really know how to come up with a solution, but at least you know what the problem is, and you might be able to pinpoint where maybe a solution could fit. The next stage is engineering. Now I know the problem. Now I need to actually start coding and starting to solve that. And so an engineer will actually write the code or work with people to write the code to solve the problem. And this might be a small problem, or it might be a large problem, but in general, they're just coders to get it done. The next step is the architect. The architect is someone who now would design that solution, right? So before an engineer would come and solve it, well, an architect might have a high-level view of how to solve it. So it might be a hot fix and just a little point, and you might just do a little band-aid, or it might be a whole architecture change that has to happen. Maybe moving on from having the code embedded in there versus having API instead. So it might be a whole architecture change depending on what is the extent of the challenge. Then you have a principal who kind of knows all those different pieces, but is able to work with other architects and try to train them on these are all the different things we could have done, or these are different things we could do. So maybe talk about how broad in a broad way of all the different solutions you could do, or the possibilities, or even try to think together on stuff. So it's very much of that career projection of learning new things along the way. And I think, so myself as a coder, I may talk a little bit about this earlier, but I started as just an R programmer, and I built applications from the ground up. And it got more and more broad as I was touching more and more systems. So meaning like in the beginning, I was just touching R, and then started reaching out to latex. and then start reaching out to, well, now I need to work with databases. So let me learn, given that there's a database up and running, let me start filling it up with data and like then create a application process which interacts with data. Then this is when, and then it gets even bigger and bigger and bigger. And then through that experience, this is how you kind of move along on that journey from an engineer to an architect to a principal. So I always feel that the best leaders in the tech side or an IT side come from engineer backgrounds, because they know what it's like to be in the weeds of things, being able to solve problems, and also being architects, because they also have a higher view of what the solution could be. That means they can talk to other architects or other people with solutions and kind of have a high-level view of how it works. They might not know all the finer details at that point in time because they're no longer in the weeds of it, but they have the experience of seeing the different solutions. Because in general, I've seen, yeah, you might have different flavors or words being used here, but in general, all similar enough. Hopefully that helps. Do you have any follow-up questions?
Is that good, Brittany?
Yeah, I think maybe one quick follow-up question is, I know at least for me, I definitely love that individual contributor role, but I don't have necessarily an interest in like the leadership, particularly like maybe the HR aspects of leadership and those kinds of things. So do you how do you suggest people who have that interest in individual contributor and even like the mentoring of other individual contributors, but who don't want the like HR types responsibilities of like team leadership? How do you see that playing into sort of how you plan out or think about your career progression?
Yeah, so there's like two routes you can go. You can go continue that principal route, which you're like individual contributor knowledge very much of that. That's also another flavor is a tech lead of that, meaning that you will oversee other people with that like, but you're not directly manager like, which I did earlier on in my career. I oversaw a lot of different programmers, and I was, while they weren't on my direct reports, I assigned the work, I did all that, so everything but the HR stuff. And then of course you go to other routes, which you get a little more disconnected from some of the work, but yeah, you go to people manager and then manager of managers type of role. But yeah, it's I think you'll look more for like tech leads or leads of blah blah blah, and that's generally what you'll be seeing. If you see titles such as heads of or a manager or directors and stuff, that's more people type of related roles.
Awesome, thank you.
Pressing on that a bit, Matthew. So looking back, I'm curious, what are indicators of opportunities that sort of speak to you or would speak to someone like that? I want to ask this clearly, that indicate that like this is a project or an opportunity where I'm going to move from sort of one stage of my career to another, or I'm going to become more senior, and like what should people look for if that's what they desire?
Yeah, so when I wanted to, or when someone wants to like take more of that management role, then it depends on the company, but what could happen is you start asking for consultants, or you start bringing consultants and start mentoring them to solve whatever problem it is. And once the therapists are seeing, your managers are start seeing that you're doing very well during the interpersonal relationship and all that, then that can help identify that you're ready. And of course, communication with your manager is the key. I've always been very close with my managers to make sure that I've known what are my goals, what do I plan to do, what do I want to do in the future, and what can I do to demonstrate that I have that ability, or what are the things I should improve on to so that I'm ready for that or will be ready for that. But then the other thing is also being very the communication ability is also key. When I was way in the beginning, I wasn't good at presentations. I wasn't good at speaking in front of a large amount of people. I was very shy, and I can go very technical really fast, and I just didn't know how to slow down and make sure that or be cognizant that not everyone understands the tech as well. So I had to change the way I'm using the wording. And so once I did a lot of soft skill growth in that. So I did a lot of different classes and whatnot. And so once you start learning those skill sets, that actually helps you to move on higher, because it is what I find is it's not really the beauty of that coding work and all of that that really the managers see. It's your communication on how to present that and show why, and describe in words on why what's a difficult challenge, or what benefit does solving this challenge give. And it's that actually gets noticed. It's not, fortunately, not the work behind the scenes. So like, for example, you build a giant application that can do so many different things. They don't see those tens of thousands of lines of code, or hundreds of thousands of lines of code. All they see is the app itself. So then that is your key selling point, is what is in the app that's useful there, what is elegant there. Because if you talk about the code, they're not going to be that interested.
Very good. I'm switching over to the Slido questions. And one question is, can you talk about any challenges you faced in setting up the systems environments for data science leaders and in working with them to get what they wanted?
Yes. So the biggest challenge was, at least in the beginning, so a little while back, when like analytics and data science was kind of new. And so you're trying to bring in platforms that no one knew how to do or install because it's new. But then two is no one is a culture change of allowing people to start having access to stuff and start building products on the business side. And so that was one of the biggest challenges, was just changing the culture. And then in addition to that, when it comes to the technical side, is now it's no longer of having an application connect to one thing. You want to have an application that can just in general connect to anything. And so that's also a little shift of how things work. So at the time I was in business, we had to come up with our own test cases to run through all the database connections, or run other jobs to make sure things work. And that was the only way you could bring it into the company, was by doing that, because otherwise then it becomes a full IT owner-owned project and all that, and it's a little different. So nowadays, I think companies are getting, or IT departments are getting much more open to these analytic systems, but I think back then it was a little more challenging.
Yeah, I'll press a little bit. I think there might be a perception that IT is difficult to work through or work with. Curious your thoughts on that perception and what you would say.
So it was a lot eye-opening, but for me, when I'm moving from business to IT, and I learned and appreciate a lot more of why it's difficult. And there's a lot of things we don't think about when we're on the business side. Or maybe we do, but how much work it actually takes, and we don't think about. Like, for example, when you say let's bring a platform into like RStudio, when I say bring our RStudio into the environment, we can just make a request like that, and then hopefully one day someone will bring it in, or IT will bring it in. But then let's take a step back and see what IT does for that. Well, IT would first need to do a full review of that product. Will it open up to security concerns, the data loss? What are the installation tech need to be? So meaning, like, do we need VMs? How big of VMs do we need? How big of a use case do people have? What about other use cases that are going to be leveraging this? For example, whatever you want to use TensorFlow, or it's a modeling software. So that's an extension to that application. What about communication? Like, you have RStudio Connect. So who's going to actually monitor that? We're going to bring it up and running, and then someone else is going to oversee it. What about actual support of these things to keep it up and running? Like, so if a ticket comes, like, you can't access RStudio, who's going to support that? So we have to make sure it's a support team actually in line for that. What is the SLAs? I mean, what is the third level agreement? Like, meaning that if I'm making requests to have access to the service, well, how long should it take for that to be actually done? and then who actually is going to fulfill those? Like, is it the data side? Is it the security side? Is it like, you got to determine all that. What about the whole architecture? Like, if you're a global company, well, you need to think about, do I need regional setups or do I need just one giant one? What about all the databases I connect to? Yeah, data, consider data privacy, data localization. So like, yeah, and what about a failover? So meaning that if your whole IT center just turned off, how do you make sure that everything comes back on and running, like running somewhere else? Disaster recovery. All those things need to be thought about. All those things need to be considered. And so that the appreciation of that happened when I moved over, and like I get questions now all the time when I'm putting in new systems, like, oh, we have to think about all these different items in order to even get started with it.
There is an anonymous question. I'd be curious if you'd be willing to share a great example of how your team has had a big impact. Also, are actuaries as fun and exciting as they say?
Yeah, so I talk when I'm doing my actuary days. So one of the there's a couple of products that we brought up, and one of them was dealing with data validation. And so when that, so this is one of the first big applications that are using Shiny to do, and the accomplishment came from the fact that this was business created, business driven. This is a very different shift from the old days where the IT side would build applications, build everything from scratch. Instead, business built it. And not only did we build it, but we had test cases. We used code, we used databases, we had staging, we had dev, staging, and prod. Like, we have all those different things that a general IT team would have. And it was just a big accomplishment when we finally rolled that out, made available, because now it's on the web page and people can access it without needing no code. And so that was probably the biggest eye-opening for that. And yes, actuaries, we are not so, I think that idea of actuaries being very introverted and whatnot is, at least the ones I know, are very outgoing and very passionate about the numbers and about the statistics and the work they do. So either maybe that's a new generation actuary coming on.
A little more on that. There's a hybrid anonymous, not anonymous question submitted by Sam through Slido. I'm a statistician / data scientist who has to work with many actuaries. How are data science and actuarial science different or similar?
Yeah, so from my view, a data science person or data scientist, it should be able to jump into any domain, and all they need to know is, where's the data, what is the data, show me the data dictionary, what is the insight you're trying to get out of there, and maybe understanding the business process. An actuary kind of knows a whole domain. So might be, if there's an actuary / data scientist, I think would have a little edge in the sense of they understand like the the methodology behind it all, and can give insight on how to actually build analysis around that. Without that, a data scientist might be a little bit lost, unless they have to work closely with business to do that. So it's kind of like that. Either you start from scratch, don't know much, but you can learn quickly and find the right people to do it, or you're someone who, as an actuary / data scientist, can have enough to get started and run with it.
Very good. Also anonymous, what new processes have you brought to Genry? How big of an impact, I guess we can append that, what impact are you hoping to make in the next 1 year, 5 years?
I can't get too much into that, but I will say that understanding the power of data is just is what I'm targeting on. But I can't really divulge more than that.
Understood, no problem. let's see. If you can share, what tools does Gen Re use for catastrophe modeling?
That's a little specific for me, as we just provide the services for usage of that tool. So,
Gotcha. And then another anonymous question. What kinds of things worked for you in changing the culture in your organization?
I think getting the right personnel in place. Finding people that are passionate about data science or whatever topic it is, and being expert in that, in both the engineering level, like I was saying earlier, but also at a leadership level. I think that's a way to make things change, because in a day, people want to hear things from the experts and people who have had a lot of experience doing that, both from leadership and from the actually doing the work.
Yeah, I had a question that I thought of, which is, as you've progressed in your career, is there any sort of discomfort around like pulling away from the actual tools and in the weeds and building applications?
Oh, yes, yes. So it's like I'm trying to stop myself from jumping into projects and start running code. And it's more because I want to be able to more mentor others to be able to do that into the different wireframes I build or oversee, or the methodologies that I've done. I also like, I have spent more time on strategy and more of those type of higher level questions and discussions. And so I would like to dig in. I still write our Markdown books internally. I still write little applets or small pieces of code if something's really challenging. But yeah, I haven't really coded, I want to say, for a couple of years now, and do miss a little bit. And I always have my fun once in a while when I come from the old days. So base R was my background. So I can write base R very thoroughly. So it's always fun when some of the new people will come up with a tidyverse and all that, and do that, and like, this is the way to do it. It's the only way to do it. And it's a little fun to be like, okay, you can do it this way. Let's do a little benchmarking, and I'll show you some differences you can do. So it's always a little fun when you have like the old timer trying to show the new people like there is some stock in the old knowledge.
And when you're mentoring or managing people, how do you balance sort of giving direction, or like saying, this is what I would do, or like hop in and actually do that? Like, how do you determine that line?
Kind of, I guess it's so blurred that I don't know. Like as a manager, manager of managers, my job is to make sure that the overall direction the vertical is going is continues the right path. So that's basically how far I go with the management of managers. I try to make sure that we have a shared vision or a shared idea of where we're going to go the next year, the next 5 years. So it's very much of that. When it comes to the mentoring part, it really depends on what vertical we're focusing on, because I have a lot of trust and a lot of faith in each of these verticals, and so I'll let them drive where it's going to go, as long as it follows that vision or follows our path, and I'll let them escalate things to me where things are either got a little bump in the road and need some course correction, or we need additional resources or whatnot. So yeah, it's very much of a trust thing.
Thank you. There's a question from Alan in the chat. Alan, if you want to ask it, welcome.
Hi, sure. Yeah, I'll hop in. I'm curious about a little bit more detail, Matthew, about your move into IT, and if there were things that you found to be particularly effective in streamlining some of those IT process requirements, resourcing, sustainment, implementation, et cetera. Those are familiar dilemmas for us as well. And I'm used to seeing folks, I think, come from IT to business, and then we have to realize, how do we ask things, having just left that function. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious if there are specific things that you feel made that successful, and if you also had to negotiate being sort of being constrained by conflicting priorities within IT, and just what helped there, or what hindered you there.
Yes. Let me see if I try to answer all those questions. I might not remember them all. But I think
any tack at it.
I think the big thing is coming from a business side, moving on to an IT, and coming from a coding background, or like a technical background, is that I have a flavor of both the way to communicate, or to change the language from a technical language into a business language, because I've been in business. I can talk actuarial, I can talk statistics, helps a lot. So having someone to be able to do that translation helps with the communication with business, because if you don't have that, things get lost in between. You don't want to get to a point when you're overcomplicating it with technical knowledge, because sometimes business doesn't care about that part. They care about what's actually being delivered. And then from the IT side, I also would need to be able to come up with actual technical requirements, or the technical needs that I need to get from the IT side. So maybe it's infrastructure, maybe it's some security, which are technically inclined. And so I need to make sure I can also talk in that language. So it's very much of being someone who can do both of those communications. So an interpreter, as well as someone who can has a direction of where they want to go with it all, but how that being able to be an interpreter at the same time is, I want to say, very beneficial. I think that's high level that hits everything, but Ellen, feel free to.
Yeah, it does. I think being able to sort of speak the kind of language in each of those domains is really important. To dig in a tiny bit more, like, did you have to compete for limited IT resources, and were there things that made that particularly effective?
I wouldn't say compete. It's more of convincing on the priority of different projects. So as long as there's alignment along the senior management of IT, alignment of these are the projects that are going on, and these are the ones that are getting prioritized. And if there's a resource need there, then that's kind of like where that discussion is happening. So as long as there's alignment and that discussion is happening, then it's fine. So I wouldn't really say competing, but it's more of some kind of a overall understanding across the IT area.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. Appreciate that.
There's an anonymous question that asks, what advice would you give someone managing a data science team? And I think we can just apply it more broadly, a team for the first time.
Having a lot of check-ins in the beginning. So there's a lot of different approaches that I've tried. A couple of them is during a stand-up. So meaning that having those 5 minutes, 10-minute calls with the whole team, figure out what all the challenges is. This allows you also have some interpersonal pieces there. But then also having those one-on-ones too. Like, so each of my direct reports, I have a one-on-one with them every week for an hour. And that's just to talk about random stuff. It could be totally not IT related or anything from our area, but then also talking about actual projects. And it's not really, for me, it's never been about like asking for permission for stuff. It's more of what are you trying to solve? What is your solution? And then does this make sense? And let's ask the right questions, and then we can come up with a solution together. So it's trying to, again, build that trust with each of your direct reports. So you oversee an engineering team, you want them to try to give you what are the solutions, what are their solutions, because you got to weigh it. You don't want to always like say that, oh, this is way and this is the only way. There's many ways. It's just there's different approaches that might take different times and different things. So that's where you got to level it and kind of talk it through.
Can I ask what the structure of these check-ins are? Now you said random topics, but is it truly a agenda-less?
Oh yeah, no, I have a series already set up. So all my direct reports are once a week. I have overall management meetings that I set up once a month, and so yeah, I just make sure they're on the calendar already, so that I'm not having to worry about making those after the fact. So 6-2.
Very good. A few more anonymous questions. I see Sally asked a question in the chat. Get to that in a second. What are your favorite resources for keeping up with the industry and self-studying?
Yeah, so I always look. So it depends on whatever I'm working on at a time. So for a while, I got really big into visualization. So I would look up what are the best books about visualizations, what are the best authors, and I'll buy a bunch of books and read those. And then the subject may turn into what about leading a data area? So I read tons of books, and so it really depends on what subject is of interest at that time or related to whatever I'm working on. So yeah, it's I tend to go the book route, the actual hard copy route. But if I'm just like wanting to know what's going on in insurance tech, I would just hop on the internet and just look up some articles or whatnot. But in general, it's always books related.
Awesome. Sally, would you mind asking your question live?
Hey, yeah. Hey, Matthew, I appreciate you
Hello.
coming today. So as a leader, it is very important to see, those beneath you, next to you, whatever, see them grow and prosper, same as you. And so as a leader, how are you facilitating that growth in your teammates? So, personally and professionally, if you're not growing, then you're not becoming, better. Some people like me, I want to be a leader one day, but also I want to be a better person. So what are you? Better person, that's so vague, but you know what I mean. So what are you doing? Like, what steps do you have examples on how you are helping the growth in your teammates?
Yep. Yeah, so in a couple of different ways. So one is a little bit to my earlier example is that I would like people to come up to me with the challenge, but also the solution, at least the initial scratch of the solution, and let's work the solution together. And so that brings the ability to, one, learn how to communicate a little more, two, thinking really about the challenge and then defining a possible solution, or even just starting at that, like what can we start with and work from there. And then also the giving them bigger projects. Like I have projects that range from little tiny ones that might be a couple of months work, or you have a couple of year ones. So putting into different projects, and I'm always very open. I always want my direct reports to tell me what do they want. Like I think I've done this maybe like 2 or 3 times a year, maybe a little more. Like, what are your goals? What do you want to do? Where do you want to be in a couple of years? Or what kind of challenges do you want me to give to you to grow? On the other side of that is I have a budget for doing we call it seminars or conferences or whatever. So I encourage those to go to those. Like for example, one of my direct reports went to our studio conference because they oversee our studio. So it made sense to be able to go to those. So I'm very much of encouragement to go to those because I want them to experience that, learn from others. Not everyone does knows all the different pieces that RSU can do. So there's a great opportunity to talk to others about that. So I encourage to be using those, but I also encourage them to communicate with others during that time.
Yeah, for sure. And so say, these people, you're giving them a lot of all these resources to do all these things. But what if all they know is I want to lead one day, or I want to be a C-suite executive one day, but they don't know really what they want. How are you able to bring that out of them?
Yeah, so I think it's given different opportunities, right? So if there is a small project, well, why not lead that project? And we can find you a consultant to work with you, and you can try to lead that consultant to see it to the end, or be more of a mentor, or maybe you be part of a bigger project as a resource for someone who can voice up what they think the solution is and whatnot, and keeping that open space, or a friendly space. Or just having discussions maybe once or twice a week where we just talk about the different problems that are currently out there, and let's talk about different solutions. So it's just very encouraging of that open communication. I think that's key, because otherwise, you won't know what you want until you actually start getting that feel for it when you're doing it.
Exactly. I love that, and I'm gonna definitely take that with me. Just all those great ideas. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Matthew, you've mentioned, I think twice now, managing consultants or working with consultants as sort of a way to develop leadership, managerial skills. It's a great perspective. I honestly, I haven't heard it before. I'm curious if you're making that point sort of, I'm assuming purposefully, but if that's something that you've actually thought through.
Yeah, no. So maybe I'm just loosely always saying managing consultant, working with consultants, but I think just working with any type of resources or employees. But in general, if you want to be more of I think it's either or. If you want to be a tech lead or a manager, you have to know how to work with other people, and so because in order to lead either a people person or as a tech person, you really need to be able to communicate with others, teach others, mentor others, or whatnot. You could just be an individual contributor who is only focused on I'm given a task, I'm gonna just do that very well, and that's perfectly fine. But if you want to start working with other people, you need to find those opportunities to be able to be doing that. So yeah, I might be using consultant as very loosely, but I just mean a resource.
Yeah. It's a great insight. There's a question in the chat from Ricardo. If you want to ask it live, give you a few seconds to hop in.
Okay. Robert, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Ricardo. Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Robert, for accepting my question. Matthew, how are you doing?
Hello. Good.
Good. So Matthew, just, I was listening to you and your experience as a leader, and I have been exposed to leadership talks, and I have read about it. And in general, I have discovered kind of two different ways to lead. One is leadership as a process, where you have a team and you teach them the procedures, and you develop, procedures in order, or protocols in order to find solutions. And the other one is either or, no mutually exclusive, where you lead by example, where you develop virtues, and those virtues are transmitted as example to your team. So, which one is the one that you have found more important in your personal experience?
I think it'd be more of a hybrid of two, because if you just focus on leading through processes or procedures, then you're more of a technical leader, in the sense of we define the process and you just follow this. So you define the wireframe, you define all that, and they just follow it. To me, that's a little more of a technical leader. But then the other side of that, you need to be able to also communicate. And I think this is where it gets you to more of the manager type of leader, or the leader, a manager of managers, because you got to communicate outside of your team. right? So you might be leading your own team, might be doing all that, but you can't get from there to outside of your team. So other managers, other leaders, then you're going to be kind of stuck. So I had to do both of those at the same time. So I can lead my own team, create processes, create some examples, but then I also need to communicate that this is what we've been doing to the rest.
Ricardo, does that sufficiently answer your question?
I was yes and no. I mean, I'm sorry, just to push a little bit.
No apologies.
Okay, fine. That's your fault. Okay, Matthew, I was reading on the comments, and I think that this idea kind of resonated with me. Managers do things right, leaders do the right things. So that's kind of I was heading to. So how do you know when you do the right things for your team? So how that goes in starting from you.
Oh, okay. So
like people, you are managing people, you are interacting with other people, but that forces you, if you want to lead them, to do the right thing to them, even if that's painful.
So I'm going to try to change how that question is, at least from my understanding. So you're saying that what are the ways that I'm leading that will benefit the team? What style of leadership am I doing to benefit the team?
Yes, I think that is a good way to put it.
Okay, so I actually do a mixture of all those, right? So if I'm looking at or reviewing a group and I see that maybe there's any gaps or anything that can be improved on, well, I'll work with that team to see what are the processes we can put in place that can actually solve that. Is this a gap? Is this a process gap? Or is this something that, or maybe it's just a communication gap? Then that's a little different. But then when it comes to a new area or something that I'm trying to bring in, then I might build that process, or I might build an example of what that's going to look like. So say, for example, if I want to build a training dashboard, someone has to build it first to actually give a demonstration of what it looks like. So I might put together a simple example of a Shiny dashboard and be able to explain like why is it beneficial, why is it, and this is like a quick minimum MVP of that. So I kind of do a mixture of all of those.
Thank you.
There's a Slido question. What are some recent developments in the data services tech platform space that you're excited about, such as database tech, streaming, real-time services, MLOps, ...
I think what's exciting, and we haven't got a chance to really spend too much time on it, but is the idea of at least the interface to build Shining apps without code. So meaning that you can create the UI generator. Because that's actually something that I was trying to do a couple years back, build a code base that would do that. And I got pretty far on it, but then things shifted, and then so I had to stop that project. And then, but then seeing that, I'm like, wow, this is actually really nice, better than what I was doing. And then, but yeah, no, that is, I think, opening a door for new things to happen. And so I'm excited to see what is going to come from that. So we haven't got a chance to really dig into that yet, but it's something we want to dig into. And I have a feeling it's going to open up more users.
There's a question, an anonymous question that probably warrants its own full session, but let's see if we can give a good, concise answer. It's essentially, how do I jump into tech? I have zero experience, but I'm interested. What approach and mindset should a person be in?
So I think it really depends on what you're doing now. So one of the things that when I first started working, so I was in a split team. One was focused on modeling and the other one was focused on actuarial. So, and they're very split in the sense that it was only the output of the modeling. So maybe reports or whatnot were actually used by the actuaries. It was never the code part. So I tried to then, during my regular work, I find some things that may be inefficient or maybe it could be improved on. And so I then brought my knowledge in coding into that space, take all that as a side project and create some process that might be simplified. And so I learned everything from the ground up from that, and then not one improved my own skill set, but then two, it demonstrated to management or to other individuals of here's the potential of using tech.
And to press a little bit, more so like the types of roles that are, let's call them like tech adjacent, like business analyst comes to mind. Curious if you have any thoughts there. So like in the world of tech, but not quite, a programming or tech role.
Yeah, so yeah, probably an analyst of some sorts. Because at the time, I believe my title was actuarial analyst. But yeah, it's an analyst role, right? So you are in the weeds of things, an actual business process. You find areas or challenges that could be improved upon, and then you take on a more engineering type of mindset of let me see if I can come up with a solution using code. Might not think of the whole thing from end to end, or I might not think of what's the actual impact to the whole business, but just in my little piece of work, let me see if I can try and improve on it. So yeah, I think it's easiest is when you're an analyst. I think you have a little more, you're very close to everything without, and maybe having more of the bandwidth to be able to do these side projects.
Very good. And we're approaching the top of the hour. I think maybe let's cap the session off with a question of, I think most of the people who attend the Hangout would consider themselves like firmly in the data science space. Correct me if I'm wrong in the Zoom chat. I actually don't know, but I think that's our running assumption. And Matthew, you have the privilege of sort of being in both data science and now IT oriented. If you could give a tip or multiple tips to data scientists working with IT, what would that be?
Being very forthcoming on what are all the things that you can want to do, right? So it's not as simple as saying, I want a platform to be available for data scientists or for myself. It's more of what are you really trying to accomplish with that platform? Because it might be modeling, it might be all that, and it's a little bit more complicated than I think just saying that I want a platform. And so if you open those channels of communication, get the support of upper management and IT, and of course your own business side, that's when you can accomplish those things. If you don't have the support of the IT side or management on either side, you're going to be stonewalled pretty fast. So you really need to make sure that communication channel is there. And if you're not that person that is ready to take that on in the sense of having that communicate open channel, well, now make sure to find that person, because there's a lot of communication needs to happen.
I think what I just heard you say was do everything rogue. Don't bring it up. So if people would want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the easiest way. So I think my LinkedIn is somewhere on the original chat. So that's probably the best way to get a hold of me. Email's pretty tough.
Pop that in the chat. Well, as always, thank you everyone for your participation. And Matthew, thank you. Awesome insights.
Thank you.